Thanks to controversial new policies, the federal government has been stealing our food. They're taking our bacon, milk, steak, potatoes, cheese, rice, beans, and butter. They're taking our fresh fruit and vegetables. Heck, they're even dipping into our desserts, too. Next time you're in the grocery store or out to eat, look around and you'll see it. The government is stealing the equivalent of 1 Tostino's pizza for every 4 you buy, 10 cans for every 24 pack of Coke you purchase. Last month, they stole 20 cents worth of orange juice for every container sold. They're stealing Frosted Flakes out of the box, Ore-Ida potatoes from the bag, Pop-Tarts and Eggo waffles, too. Who are you going to believe? Some egghead economist or your own eyes, said Mark Vittner from Wells Fargo. Rafael Andrade, a small business owner in Mesa, Arizona, said he's noticed. Lisa Staubner, a 33-year-old Houston resident, said,
Whole wheat pasta had gone from 16 ounces to 13.25 ounces. I bought 3 boxes and it wasn't enough. I bought the same amount I always buy. I just didn't realize it because who reads the sizes all the time? It's sneaky because they figure people won't know.
Hello, my name is Matt Battiali. I'm a financial analyst at S&A Research in Baltimore, Maryland. In the next few minutes, I'm going to expose a government-created scam taking place right this moment in America's food industry. No matter where you shop or dine or what you eat, I can guarantee this will soon be your problem too, and it's just the beginning. If you don't believe the government could really be stealing food, just ask any food producer, supermarket owner, or restaurateur. They've been given the choice to either eat the tax themselves or let the government take it out of our food. Of course, many companies are opting for the latter. Jack Brown, chief executive of Statter Brothers Markets, a 167-store grocery chain in Southern California, said, "The big challenge will be how much can we swallow and how much can we pass along?" In Chicago, the government is demanding 21% of every steak sold. At Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, a small chain in the Chicago area, they're giving into the government's extortion and eating the costs themselves. But at Morton's, they're taking it right out of the steak on your plate. Morton's CFO Ron Dinella said, "We believe that our guests are flexible and we have the capacity to do that." Of course, because the government never misses an opportunity to double dip, the major food manufacturers are getting hit too. At Tabachnik Fine Foods Incorporated, a maker of high-end frozen soups, the government is taking 20 to 30% of their product. Owner Ben Tabachnik said it's going to reduce the margin dramatically on the product. He also said, "We're stuck." Many companies are simply packaging their food in smaller containers. For example, a carton of Tropicana orange juice has shrunk 7.8%. A pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream has shrunk 12.5%. And jars of Peter Pan peanut butter are now 9% smaller. They're hitting up coffee shops and boutiques as well. Starbucks has suggested taking $1 out of every package of coffee, and so is Seattle's Best. Paula Rosenblum, managing partner for retail systems research at Focus.com, an online specialist network, said,
"Lately, it hasn't been subtle. I mean, they've been shrinking by noticeable amounts."
This isn't the first time the feds have intervened in the food markets either. In the 1950s, the government hit the farmer with acreage controls and marketing quotas, pricing commodities out of markets, causing huge surpluses to pile up, which the government then became responsible for distributing. Of course, the government has intervened in the corn markets for years, but these new policies mark the first big moment where the government has actually stolen food straight from your shopping cart. Stephanie Clifford, a reporter covering the retail industry for the New York Times Business Desk, writes, "Chips are disappearing from bags, candy from boxes, and vegetables from cans, and we're only witnessing the beginning." Kellogg expects the government will steal more cereal out of its Wheaties box this year. Safeway, Kroger, Sara Lee, McDonald's, and Walmart all expect to see the government take more food this year too, which means less for you and me. The government is even stealing Gerber baby food. Why are they doing this? And who are they giving all this stuff to? To the millions of Americans who don't pay any taxes. Rich bankers in Manhattan are also some of the biggest beneficiaries of this heist. Of course, they're not taking home baby food and potato chips. They found a way to turn this theft, which has already exceeded $1 trillion, into cash. You may be wondering why you haven't seen a big story about this yet. Well, the government didn't pass a bill through Congress or make an official announcement. Instead, they formed a small yet powerful group which basically has little to no oversight or accountability. It's basically their job right now to steal as much food as they can without upsetting the general population. I know this sounds hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. One financial blogger writes,
"It's a strange public-private bastard hybrid that was conceived in secrecy."
One congressional official familiar with the group wrote,
"It's immoral, unconstitutional, promotes bad economics, and undermines liberty.
As investigative journalist and author David DeGraw writes,
their crimes are so big, so huge in scale, it's very hard for people to even wrap their head around it. The audacity and absurdity of it all is mind-boggling. No free market, no democracy of any kind, all done in secrecy. They have put into motion a system that will destroy the very existence of what's left of an economic middle class. Talk about the ransacking and burning of Rome. No matter which way you look at it, we're all in serious trouble.
But folks are beginning to notice this scam and demand answers from the government. Last week, New York Fed President William Dudley answered some questions on the topic. He downplayed what was happening, calling the situation tame, and pointed out that the government hasn't been stealing other items like iPads. An angry member of the audience yelled back, "I can't eat an iPad." As this trend continues to escalate and folks across the country wake up to what's taking place, it'll only be a matter of time before we see shortages and major price explosions. According to John Foley at the New York Times, food riots in 2011 are possible. Now, I don't know about you, but when the world still looks and feels nice, I have a tough time believing there's trouble brewing. It's basic human nature. Why change what you're doing if things aren't that bad? But I believe, based on the information I've gathered and my experience following the commodities markets for more than 15 years, that it's only a matter of time before this development goes from bad to worse. The government theft of our food supply will likely escalate as our currency continues to inflate and as global supply routes get choked off. Scott Irwin, an agricultural economics professor at the University of Illinois, said, "Most of the impact won't be felt for 6 months, but as you'll soon see, all of this is really just a symptom of a much deadlier disease which could affect where you drive, shop, and work, how you prepare for retirement, and even your medical care. And when this crisis erupts with full force here in the United States, there may be nothing that can save us." I realize that sounds rather dire, but over the past 100 years, more than 24 countries have faced the exact same crisis, and when governments begin stealing from their citizens in this secret way, the result was a crisis of epic proportions. The countries include Greece, China, Germany, Argentina, Hungary, Japan, Russia, Brazil, Austria, Turkey, Philippines, Taiwan. Now, I can't guarantee that the preemptive measures I'm going to show you will protect you from the worst, but I can promise you this: taking a few simple steps now will make you much better off in the months to come. Before I go into these details, let me first present to you the facts I've gathered so you can judge this situation for yourself. For starters, is the United States government really stealing your food? Absolutely. How is this happening? Well, the way it works is rather than intervening in grocery stores or factories where all of this food is produced, the government, via a secret organization that's only required to reveal a fraction of their financial dealings, instead intervenes earlier in the process in your pocketbook and bank account. Essentially, what they do is alter your money in a special way so that when you go to the grocery store will actually give you less food than the same money could buy just a few weeks ago. This occurs in a series of steps. Let me explain. Step 1. It starts at the top. The theft begins when the federal government needs some money. They call up the Federal Reserve and ask for help. The Federal Reserve is the small and secretive group I've alluded to. They're like the government's own private bank. They have enormous powers and next to no oversight. Step 2. The Federal Reserve says, "Sure, we can help you." They loan the government some money and the government promises to pay it back. Of course, the Federal Reserve doesn't have any real money to lend, but what they do have is complete control of the financial system in the United States. So they basically end up printing new money out of thin air. The government doesn't really intend to pay this money back either, but they do print some treasury bonds, some IOUs, and give them to the Federal Reserve to hold on to just for good measure. Of course, these days, all this happens electronically with a few strokes of the computer keyboard. Since 2008, the Fed and the government have created nearly $2 trillion this way. Step 3. This is where the theft reaches you. You see, each new dollar created out of thin air this way must get its value from somewhere. Where does it get it? It drains it from the existing money. Every time this happens, every time a new dollar gets created out of thin air, a little bit of value is stolen from the money you currently hold. This is what most people refer to as inflation. For instance, let's say you have $100,000 in the bank. At 9.6%, which many folks believe to be the real rate of inflation, here's what your money would look like over time. After a decade of 9.6% inflation, you'd be left with $39,985. A $60,000 loss just by doing nothing. With inflation, the government is stealing money from your bank account. But really, the way it works out is that instead of dipping into your bank account and taking money, your money gets stolen in other ways, such as food, energy, water, and consumer goods. You see, with each new dollar that's created out of thin air being worth less, producers have to raise prices. Why? Because the goods they're selling aren't changing in value. But the dollars you hold certainly are. They have to raise prices just to keep up. Same deal with wholesalers, retailers, all the way down the line. What's the upshot of all this inflation? Well, Patricia Hill of the Washington Times wrote, "Loose money policies in the United States have set off a price spiral in food, energy, and other basic goods needed to run the economy." Now, it takes a bit of time for new currency to cycle through the economy and for prices to rise. But over the past year, we've seen the start of it. Prices have started to rise, especially in food. The price of beef has risen 15% in the past year. Turkey's up 18%, pork is up 22%, and fish just as much. Lentils, eggs, onions, and milk all rose about 18% last year. This past December alone, fresh fruits and vegetables rose by 15 and 22%. In 6 months last year, wheat prices doubled and corn and sugar prices rose 73%. Just last month, prices at the wholesale level rose the most in 37 years, since November 1974. According to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, food prices are the highest since they started keeping track in 1990. These rising food prices are going to be passed on to you and me. As the Wall Street Journal wrote recently, an inflammatory tide is beginning to ripple through American supermarkets and restaurants. Kraft Food raised its price on Maxwell House coffee by 22%. Safeway, Kroger, Breyers, Domino's, McDonald's, Nestle, General Mills, Stater Brothers, Kellogg, Walmart, and Giant are all raising or preparing to raise prices. I don't know about you, but to me, this sounds a lot like stealing. The Fed prints money, prices rise, and we're suddenly left paying a lot more for the same amount. Or in some cases, when companies creatively shrink packaging, we're paying the same amount and getting a lot less. Either way, how's that any different from the government taking food straight out of our mouths, pantries, and dinner tables? Financial writer Lou Rockwell said, "It's no different from a burglar in your house wanting to steal your money. And it's not just food either." Laura Krogan at the New York Daily News writes, "Fresh financial pain is on the way with price hikes expected on everything from underwear to cereal." I'm sure you've seen the difference at the pump. Regular unleaded gasoline has risen an average of 86 cents this year. The price of tires has risen 15% the past year. Tuition prices at colleges have risen 8%. Some retail analysts expect clothes across the board to see double-digit percentage hikes toward the end of the year. Even leather and furniture prices are beginning to jump. The thing is, as high as prices have risen this year, the worst is yet to come. Economist Bill Lapp of Advanced Economic Solutions says, most of those increases have yet to be passed on to consumers. But, he warns, a cost bubble has moved into the system. Even worse, there's a final phase of inflation that's far, far worse than paying more for food and clothes. It's far worse than increasingly higher prices. And we're much closer to it than most folks think. Of course, if you ask the government, they'd tell you everything's okay, that everything is all right and under control, but that's clearly not the case. Bottom line, the federal government has been manipulating the truth about inflation in America for more than 3 decades. As the Wall Street Journal writes, the official inflation number should be taken with a fistful of salt. There's plenty to worry about. Over the past 30 years, the federal government has made a lot of changes to the way it calculates inflation. Why would they do this? Because it's in every bureaucrat's self-interest to make sure the progress report to the nation looks as good as it possibly can. So they've been slowly molding the methodology to further that agenda. Here's a great example. Everyone knows Apple computers aren't cheap. The cheapest Mac laptop costs about $999 today. It also cost $999 a few years ago. That's the same price, right? Not according to the way that our government calculates inflation. Using a piece of creative accounting called hedonic quality adjustments, they're able to call this a price cut. Their reasoning? Try and follow this logic. According to the government, because this year's Mac is faster and sleeker than the model you could have bought several years ago, then it's like you're really getting more for your money. So to them, it's like prices have really gone down. Backwards, I know. Or even worse, when the price of an object actually does go up, the government will tell you that the price really hasn't because you're getting all kind of new and improved features. They must think we're morons. That's just one way they understate prices.